Welcome to the Book of Eli. The topics of this multimedia show are going to encompass a diverse and far-reaching range of topics. This is going to include, but not limited to, art, science, medicine, politics, comedy, religion, culture. Hopefully you find some or all of it both entertaining and thought-provoking. The nature of this will be fun for me personally, because at this point in my life, I realized I'm not just going to quote unquote shut up and dribble as others have been told, literally or figuratively. Individuals have certainly been told these words outright, but I also think that younger generations today have been implicitly told this as well. The logic being that there is a direct linear correlation between age, experience, and wisdom. This is false. This also leads to disempowerment of young people like me. I feel at this moment in this time in 2025, too much of the world has become segregated, whether this is politically, culturally, musically, or really, and most importantly, actually, quite physically. There is crippling anxiety, paranoia, sadness, and anger. I did speak to this to some degree in my book, The New Theory of Relativity, but I want the words in that book to really serve as a tennis toss or a springboard jumping into the oceanic depths of the current human experience today and my experience. I want to be a strong voice and a pushing for desegregation of the mind, collaboration among families, communities, and others. We cannot silo into our comfort zones because it leads to poor physical and mental health. And really, most importantly, it allows for concentration of power and money among the privileged elite at the expense of the very vast majority of us who were not born into, with, or kind of have access to unnecessary and exorbitant financial wealth. I also want to highlight that this is regardless of political affiliation. This is regardless of other identity, sexuality, gender, job identity, racial identity, or ethnic identity. The focus on the overemphasis of aspects of those identity allows for concentration of inequality, concentration of power among the elite. It allows for oligarchy. It allows for nepotism. And for the vast majority of us, that is what can lead to anxiety, paranoia, sadness, and anger that can ultimately become untargeted. I think that one of the most toxic and unforgivable and really possibly evil traits that people have is to silence others. I think that the ability to speak into silence or through silence or in spite of silence is perhaps the very definition of self-empowerment. Caged birds must sing, especially when forces are trying to throw them back into their cage. Good word must be spread. Life is too short not to share and live your truth, and the squeeze on the millennial generation and subsequent generations has choked and ultimately taken lives. I also believe that fear in being silenced will always benefit the oppressor, as I have already suggested. This can be true in a variety of relationships, communities, and systems. This can be true in an abusive relationship and an abusive household. And it can also be true in larger systems and political environments with powerful individuals invested selfishly in perpetuating inequality. If one is silenced and or if they are fearful, then they will retract into groups of like-minded people. This could lead to theoretically ultimately retracting into one's own family, one's own household, or most extremely, in the age of social media and artificial intelligence, into one's own mind, phone, tablet, or computer screen. This retraction or fear or anxiety or paranoia will lead to loss of community, possibly loss of family, and most dangerously, loss of self. The counter to all of this, in my view, is sharing your story and speaking your truth without fear. It's being funny, it's being serious at the same time, or not. Some things are funny, some things are serious, and that's okay. It's knowing that there is strength in numbers, as the Golden State Warriors marketed successfully during their legendary playoff run. I'm excited to share my perspectives, theories, experiences with you. This is going to involve, as I said from the beginning, a number of topics, including mental health, generational trauma, personal storytelling, struggles and successes, and ultimately my thoughts on culture, politics, sports, and finance. To me, I view life kind of as music. It can be fun, it can be happy, it can be sad, it can be beautiful, tragic, and it can even be mundane. I plan to share my art as well as my scientific knowledge, as well as my personal stories, and eventually, once I can be free from perhaps what I hope to advocate for most strongly, freedom from student debt, I want to get involved more into music and cinema. I think good music and good cinema really boils down to a couple of things. Do you have the real life stories, number one? And do you have the imagination? If you have both of those, then all you need to be is in a community that where that can be shared and everybody can build, build or contribute their music, their thought, their imagination into good art. I think also that this can be a very beautiful and perhaps unique combination of being selfish and selfless. As they say on airplanes, you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, because ultimately, if you don't have any oxygen, then you have no opportunity to give oxygen to somebody else. And what I mean by that is sharing what I've learned, sharing my truth, being my most authentic self. This will free my own mind. This will benefit me tremendously, because authenticity is self-empowerment. I think it's also selfless, because like all humans, we can benefit from experience of others. I have such a range of musical interests. Taylor Swift, Kanye West, Eminem, Amapiano, some South African music, jazz, pop, house music, European house music, Afro house. And then, in terms of literature, a number of authors as well, too. The most formative one as a child being J.K. Rowling, of course. But I think that in sharing, you are really, allowing other people to see how you think and see if it applies, see if they like it or if they don't like it. And if they like it or don't like it, that's okay. That's what art is. I think also we must reject anti-intellectualism. There has been such a movement, especially during COVID, to reject intellectual thought, to reject education, to reject science, to reject knowledge. And knowledge is power. And if you're rejecting education, science, art, what are you doing? So I hope that maybe you'll, from what I share, that maybe you'll take and learn something that can be entertaining, because there will be the diversity of the emotional spectrum from tragedy to comedy. Hopefully it may take your mind off of your own, day-to-day struggles for at least a short time, to a place where you can be free, and maybe even encourage you to speak your truth. Because in my imperfection, I am sharing my own humanity and my own vulnerability. And humanity and vulnerability and truth are things that I think every human deserves and is entitled to. It's good for oneself, and as well as it's good for others. It's also good for building community and trust in an age where we have lost, to a large degree, both. In sharing some traumatic experiences, I think that my survival and persistent belief in good principles, and being able to really remain optimistic and realistic, is also something worth sharing. I want to be clear though. Trauma bonding is not a good thing. And it often leads, in my opinion, to a race to the bottom. Because what people tend to do is, who had it worse, individually and or collectively. And I'm very familiar with people, even in my own family, who very much have made and want to make life a race to the bottom. A life as a race to being 6 feet under. That is not life. Comparison of trauma especially will be the thief of joy. The goal of sharing trauma should never be who had it worse, but how can we all overcome it to live most authentically as ourselves? How can we uplift? How can we overcome? One of the so-called guardians in my childhood household was very good at manufacturing a victim mentality and abusing it. Even to those he and or she was supposed to guard and protect. In my mind, that guardian murdered the mind of his and or her own child. Even worse, that alcoholic led to his death while they sat in real estate worth $2 million US and never giving a dime to support that child. This is a story that should be told, and I believe its lessons can be extrapolated to individuals and systems in America and really beyond. To go to something a little bit more positive, I really liked the language in some commercials that Russell Westbrook had, based on 2 simple words: why not? I firmly believe that these 2 words, along with other phrases, can allow us all to overcome fear. To me, it is kind of the opposite of why me or poor me type of the thinking, where you kind of have a race to the bottom. Why not have big dreams? Why not remain good in the face of bad? Why not use truth and humor and love and compassion, even when it is most hard. In fact, I think it should be done, it should be thought most strongly when it is hard, when you are confronted with bad energy, bad people, and negative people, people that are trying to make you less than. I think that this mentality can lead to self fulfillment. I think that violence, violent thoughts can lead to violent actions, and violence only begets more violence. Therefore, the only way to defeat violence is with peace. The opposite of violence, thoughts, and actions is peace, individually and collectively. My life up until this point has actually shown that I've really been living proof that I have done what I put my mind to. And part of this has been achieved using the thought process of why not? I have seen others do it and said, I can too. And this ultimately leads, in my opinion, to really the freest mind. Because then the question that you have to ask yourself is, what do I want to do? To talk a little bit about me specifically, because I think that that's something that is important in discussing, since I will be, you know, one of the voices, and the first voice in this story. My K through 12 education involved winning a citizenship award, which at the time of winning it surprised me, playing a couple of saxophones, and succeeding at a high level in multiple sports: baseball, basketball, water polo, and graduating second in my class in a high school of a graduating class of less than 200 students, where less than a quarter of them went on to four-year institutions. After graduating high school, I considered medicine and law as professions, and as an undergraduate, realized that I ultimately had to decide one or the other, because I either had to spend the time diving into physics, chemistry, organic chemistry, biology, biochemistry, and all of this stuff, or political science, because there just was not enough time in the day to do both. And ultimately, I could not, and one cannot be in medical school and law school at the same time. Doesn't mean that they can't do it consecutively, but they cannot do it concurrently. Ultimately, I decided, with my interest being predominantly in math, science, and community, that really the way to go was medicine. And after working one summer in a basic science research lab, and volunteering in Richmond, California, in a hospital that has now been shut down. But I shadowed a former Division I college football player who became an emergency medicine physician. And I saw him do it. The environment was one that I felt was, a great community and doing good things. And I said, yep, that's what I want to do. Ultimately attended medical school in California, as I did for all of my prior education. And the meaning of the work, and also the job security, was important to me, because I was not born into or really ever given really any money. And I needed not financial wealth, but financial security, because because of the money, but because I wanted the simple things. I wanted assurance that I could provide myself food, roof, transportation, and basic life necessities. And in the marriage of a profession that I envisioned myself doing, um, knew would be contributing meaningfully to the community and would provide me some degree of security. And the subject matter I found highly interesting and intellectually stimulating. It uh, was a bit of a no brainer, even though the trauma mentally and physically that the process of undergraduate and graduate medical education puts on those, especially who do not come from sort of a nepotism situation where their parents or family are either physicians themselves or come from money. I matched into emergency medicine in New York City and was a New York City emergency medicine physician in training from 2020 to 2023 during the height of COVID. I was also one of the first people to be offered and accept the COVID vaccine. After 3 years in New York, I knew that I wanted to return to California because it was home, and the entirety of what the state offers me provided me, I think, the greatest opportunity for mental and physical freedom in a diverse community that I have and will always love with its strengths and weaknesses. And I think that in this political environment, especially at the national level, which is now filtering down to the local level, we have the constant othering of people based on race, gender, sexuality, age, country of origin. And California, I feel like, gives me the opportunity to be most authentically myself, despite what the current administration has done to, for example, the city of Los Angeles. And the city of San Francisco will always have my heart because that's where I was born and raised. And to me, and in my genuine opinion, it's the greatest city in the world. So, all may sound good, but I think that, like I had suggested, sharing of some traumatic experiences is important for me to share, as well as I think important to connect communities and to connect to how we interact with each other. The first person that I want to mention in my personal story is my brother Isaiah. As the oldest sibling in my family, he was the first person that I was really able to develop a relationship with as a best friend and as a protector to a certain degree. It's important for me to share his story for myself and for him because at this point, after death, to me, the most important things about him are his name and his story. Because even though his personality was very different from mine, and his strengths and weaknesses were also, like everyone, different from mine, which is true for everyone, we were and are brothers. His story matters. His life mattered. Our relationship matters. And our survival, in spite of a highly turbulent and emotionally manipulative and violent household and family, while he and I did not hurt others, is not an easy feat. In fact, his supposed biological mother wants to continue to silence him and me after death by preventing the truth from being shared. His codependent supposed biological father believes that there is no point effectively in sharing his story because he had nothing. And in that line of logic, having is financial wealth. To me, this is actually great evidence of how generational purpose becomes generational trauma. It is how older generations hoard resources at the expense and lives of younger generations and younger people, sometimes even in their own family. One of Isaiah's uncles is a healthcare executive who essentially never showed up once in his life, but had the unmitigated gall to show up at his funeral, praise the words that I said, and pretend as if he did not hoard his own resources and only support generations older than him in our family, and really have zero interest in my brother during his life. This is an example of the laughable thoughts and prayers argument, the words that some people offer with no real substance in political, community, and in general life today. Those words, in cases like the examples that I just gave, have zero substance. Words matter, yes, and not but. Actions speak louder than words. So while he, Isaiah, nor I do no harm to others, he ultimately hurt himself. Not with tattoos, he never had a tattoo. Not with piercings, he also never had a piercing. Not with self-cutting, which he also never did. Not even with alcohol misuse, which is common for people with poor mental health. He died by suicide. And I believe the main reason for this is that the supposed guardians and family in the household are not solely responsible for, but laid the foundation for theft of the mind. And theft of the mind will lead to loss of the mind. And excusing toxic behavior in the name of family is no different whether or not that family is biological or a gang or really even a political entity. Loss of the mind will ultimately and likely lead to loss of self. And with that, I'm going to end this introduction. If you care to contribute to my storytelling and art, please support me and my art by sharing my word on your social media, in clips or in whole, and supporting my published work. So far, this includes my books Dismantling Generational Trauma, The New Theory of Relativity, and Voyager, which is a Spanglish collection of poetry, all of which can be purchased on Amazon, read on Kindle, or you can reach out to me via email or social media, and I will do my best to get you a physical copy if you would like. You can also find a lot of this on my art house website that I developed, craterera.com, CRATERERA.com. Thanks for watching or listening, and I'm looking forward to what is to come.